All right, we are off and running. So welcome everyone to
I know
EDFR.
we have a combination of,
What? Go ahead.
I just want to give everyone a heads up. I think that my internet is very delayed, so you might get quite frustrated with my contributions. Do you know we have a combination of both, more than usual, more frustrated than usual. We have a combination of first year students in this class, middle students, and students in their last semester. So it's going to be one of those combos with a little bit of everyone. That's what's going to make it exciting. All right, Dr. Shaman.
Okay,
ahead.
Cool. Well, welcome everyone to EDFR 501 for the spring semester of 2021. As Dr. G said, this is going to be a bit of a unique class. While this class is always a class where cohorts can come together, this, I think, is the first time where we've had all 3 years all in one place. We have people who are in their very first classes in the graduate program. We have people who are finishing their first year. We have people who are finishing their second year. I don't think anyone's necessarily in the 3rd year, but there are definitely people who are at the end of their program. So wherever, I got it, wherever you are in the program, welcome. I think that the diversity that we are going to see in this class is a great opportunity. I think it's going to be a little bit intimidating at times for everyone in some way, shape, or form, but Dr. G and I are here to be your steady captains on this crazy ship that we've piloted everyone through so far, and this semester will be no different. We're both really looking forward to the content of this class. Research is a passion of both of ours, one that we probably don't get enough of an opportunity to express. And in this class, it's a little bit less of a focus on like rush to produce a massive research project, which is kind of what it seems at first glance, and much more of a conversation about what goes into a research project. This is going to be a class where we take a deep dive into the literature review, into the methods section, things that many of you who have been in the program have already written multiple times, but never necessarily with the intentionality and the guidance that we are going to be providing you in this class. So we really, really like that. For those of you who are just starting, you are at an advantage in some respects because you are getting this information on the front end. When you get to ABA 1 in the fall, you will have this deeper understanding of what goes into a research project, what it means to write a lit review, how to find literature effectively. I'm someone who I will not call out by name, but can out themselves if they so choose. Emailed me regarding an article over the weekend, and I was shocked that we had been unable to this point to provide the right means to access that article. It was an article that wasn't super duper challenging to find, but she has, this person has done very well without the benefit of that information up front. You guys who are just starting will have that information up front, which will be extremely beneficial for you going forward. Where you're at a little bit of a disadvantage is you don't have the context of a year or two in the program, in terms of the type of things that we do research on. So there's going to be some push and pull, but I think the combination of everyone in one spot is going to really help everyone. And I am really looking forward to that. All right. So go ahead, Dr. G. Do you want to throw something in? Are you good?
Well, if you can hear me,
We can.
I think in this class, it's important to understand the final product first. And everything gets poured into that final product. Keep in mind that at the end of this class, you need to have a well-designed research project. That is what all your efforts are going into. You are not running this research project. You are not applying it. You are not implementing it. You are designing it, but it needs to be really well thought out and really well designed. So again, this comes up every semester. I think people think it's too good to be true. You're not doing the project in this class. You are not, you are meaning you need to have a research question that needs to be based on good theory, surrounding literature. You need to have crafted a literature review. You need to have developed a method section, that you have incorporated a well thought out design, because you could have the best research question in the world. If you don't have the right design to answer it, you have nothing. And if you have a great design, but you really don't have a dependent or independent variable, you have nothing. So this class really either helps you start thinking that way, or it takes what you've done in the past and it forces you to think that way. And regardless, you need to go through that filter before the end of the program. And there are pros and cons. I don't want people to think there's anybody that's taking it towards the end of their stint as a grad student that it's an advantage for, or vice versa. I think there are pros and cons to taking it in the front, middle, and the end. So again, your final product in this class is a well-designed research project that will encompass research questions, a theory to back that up, a review of literature, and a method section. What it will not encompass would be results or a discussion. You will have no results because you did not implement anything. And again, I think for some of our seasoned veterans here who have gone through at least 3 semesters of core courses where you had to design it, implement it, and write about it, that's not happening in this class. You are designing it and writing about it. Okay? So keep that in mind. You get to spend a lot of time thinking. And that's what we want you to do in this class. All right.
And I think to piggyback on that, the challenge of a research class when you are not actively collecting data is that you are not getting kind of the feedback in terms of your methods. You're not getting that immediate feedback as to whether or not you need to change anything, whether or not you need to adapt what you're looking for or at. And that's actually a good thing, right? It's when we set out to do research, we should have a question in mind. We should have a testable means or a means for testing that specific question, and we should implement it to its fullest. And when we are not actively collecting data as we are doing our research, we are forced to kind of stick to our guns and kind of almost face the consequences, or both reinforcers and punishers, of those decisions that we made early on. And that's the truer form of research. That's how research really should be done. You read the literature, you find the problem, you develop the means for testing the possible solution to that problem, and then just see what happens, right? Research doesn't always produce meaningful results, but that doesn't necessarily make it bad research. But when we are allowed to adapt what we are doing on the fly, then we just feel like, oh, I can just change and add what I did into my method section, and it's going to be okay. And that's not really true. That's not really how we should be looking at it. So while we are taking this opportunity to kind of force you to stop and think about your research question, think about your theory, think about why the question exists and why you are choosing the interventions or answers that you are choosing from, you are actually learning the proper way to conduct a research study. All right? All right, say hello to my cat. This is Apollo. For those of you who are just starting, you will see plenty of my cats throughout the next couple of years. So get used to them. All right, are any questions so far? Just kind of conceptually, where we are, where we're going, what we're going to be doing. All right, sounds good. Then let's go ahead and pull up Moodle, and we will kind of walk through the major components. Okay. All right. So as we've been kind of hinting at, the goal of this course is to build a research project from the ground up. All right. Every major assignment in this course is going to be geared towards either helping you develop the concept behind the research process, or the actual step in the research process from conceptualization through development of the method section. We will spend a lot of time, or a significant amount of time over the next few weeks, going over recent literature to identify what research questions we should be looking at. How many of you saw this class on your schedule and immediately started thinking about what topics you wanted to research? How many of you were in that position? A couple of you. There were more of you. I promise you that you were thinking about that already. But that thought process potentially started without looking at what people are currently looking at, right? When you have that thought process that starts on the front end, you're starting to think about research in terms of what you are interested in, not what the field is interested in. And research, current research, staying with current research, is all about the marriage of those two things. All right. I'm not saying that you need to go through Java and find all of the questions that every single article has asked. And regardless of what you're interested in, you need to stick to just those things. But you should be aware of what questions current research is asking us, what is being asked of us. And then from that, we find the topics that we are interested in, and we find the ways that we want to contribute to the field based off of what the current questions in the field are. All right, so we will be taking a deeper look at the current research. We will be taking a look at the questions that are being asked and how they are posing specific questions, and we will be building questions from there. We'll then be taking a look at what our particular, or what the theories are behind some of the interventions that we might have default to. So it's very easy to say, oh, we see this problem, we have this typical intervention, so I'm going to do some research on it. Well, that's not developing a theory as to why a particular intervention or research question needs to be asked, about where those problems came from, and about what is actually needed to solve that. That sort of research is a very shallow form of replication, just saying that was someone else's problem, that was someone else's answer, and I'm going to do that same thing. All right. We want to be able to look at things at a much deeper level than that. From there, we are going to be diving into the wonderful process of IRB and the Institutional Review Board. This is the process by which we actually get institutional approval to do the research that we say we want to do. It is the case that all research that is done should be approved by the human subjects laboratory, because we are working with humans, and we are working particularly with a population that is a protected class. We are working with a population that can't always give consent to research for themselves. So we need parent consent. We need someone else to be able to look over this and say, yes, this is a worthwhile study that is not going to produce harm to any of our subjects. From there, we're going to dive into the actual process itself. And this is where we will be spending, and if you're following along, I'm in about week 6 right now of the major projects. Or the different activities that we'll be having. But from there, we will start to really kind of churn through the literature review process. And this process that we're going, once we kind of embark on the actual drafting of the literature review, it's going to be about a month of back and forth and diving in and analyzing and reviewing and working with a peer, and really making sure that you have a not just coherent, but meaningful literature review that leads you to a specific question. And for those of you who have been around for a while and written a few literature reviews, I want you to be able to take this time to pull those literature reviews up. And I want you to read through them. I want you at this point to really be able to compare the style of your literature review to the style of the literature reviews that you are reading in your articles. And not to say that what you have written is not equal or not quality, but I want you to be able to compare and contrast. What are the things that you include that those articles don't include, and vice versa? And then ask why. Why did I feel it was necessary to put that information in when I don't see that information in other places? Why do they include other information that I have yet to include? Many of us at this point have written literature reviews that really just summarize previous research. Sometimes they lead in a particular direction, but maybe they don't get to the question. Maybe they don't build to the specific question. Maybe there's a lack of analysis. Maybe there's great analysis, but not enough summarizing. It's a balance between all of those things. So we will be really spending a significant amount of time working on those literature reviews, really fine-tuning them so that we have a product that we are truly happy with. Through that time, we are also going to take a bit of a deeper dive into single subject design and some of the nuances of the development of the method section and how that all emanates from the design that we choose. all right? The method section itself is pretty algorithmic, right? For those who have written one before, you know, you write your participants, you do your setting and your materials and your dependent variable and independent variable and data collection, this and that, and it's very kind of writes itself. But the decisions come on the design side of things. So we'll spend a few weeks really reviewing what those designs are, how they work, what they look like. Once we get our method section in, it's going to be really a couple weeks of fine tuning, putting everything together, and then we will really have an opportunity to share at the end of the semester. So our goal is going to be, by kind of when we return from spring break, to have an opportunity for every single person to present their lit review kind of from theory all the way through to question and their identified intervention topic in a really detailed way. So in the past, in some other classes, we haven't, we maybe didn't give that as much weight, but I think that, especially considering the 3 generations of candidates that we have in this class, it's going to be very important for those who are graduating to, one, provide models for those who are just starting, those who are graduating to make sure that they are able to articulate the nuance of what we are studying, and for those who are just starting to learn to articulate the nuance in this way, and right from the get-go have an opportunity to start presenting. All right, so those are, that's kind of the nuts and bolts of the class. Dr. G, do you have anything that you want to add for any of those activities or those components?
Well, I think inevitably kind of part of the conversation that occurs behind the scenes, you know, maybe with the candidates or the candidates back at their practicum sites for this particular classes, you may hear rhetoric like, well, you just need to learn how to do this in order to get through graduate school. You're only doing this because it's a part of what you have to do in order to sit for your exam, et cetera, limiting the utility from this course to this course. However, it's been my experience, as well as numerous other people, that it's the complete opposite of that. I would argue, highly argue, that you're not really engaged in behavior analysis unless you're engaged in good sound research, because you are, as a behavior analyst, you are trying to solve a problem, and you want to know that what you're doing is what has impact on the problem, on the outcome. You need data to be able to support that, and you need to collect the data in a way that definitively points to the fact that your treatment, Vincent, your treatment, Ilya, your treatment, Ashley, was the reason why the child learned how to do this. Because if it's not, then you shouldn't be paid for that. You should not be submitting a bill to an insurance company for services that you provided that did not lead to the outcome. And if you're in a school setting, you certainly shouldn't be wasting taxpayer money on things that are not leading to the betterment of the child. And the way you're able to answer that question is through experimental analyses, through experimental design, through the scientific process. And I do think that our responsibility as scientists of behavior is actually kind of highlighted, magnified, because our field science, and science is our field, or in either educational field or the mental health or behavioral health field, they don't necessarily have natural sciences that drive what they do. So they're not held to that ethical standard, or that's not part of their discipline's mantra. And so it's different for us. It really is. And you've got to see that it is not just about something you have to do to get through class or to pass an exam. It's about what you're going to do every day. And you have to be able to think like a scientist in order to be able to work as a scientist. And I think those things are one and the same. At least in our field it is, but just keep that in mind. You are dealing with two huge issues regardless of what entry point you get involved in, the insurance industry or the educational industry. And what I mean by that is somebody else is paying for you, and you better make sure that what you're submitting that payment for and to is validated. And that cannot happen in your own mind, that you've convinced yourself that what you're doing is making the difference. That shouldn't be the evidence. And one of the things that I think you need to be really after this, read through some materials, is what is evidence? The same level of acceptance, the same level of credibility. Evidence comes in a variety of forms and flavors, but not all of it is worthy of using to determine whether what we're doing is working and what do we need to do next. So just keep that in mind. I think that's important to put into your mix master right now, and when you're reflecting on where you were in your career.
I think that's, that is a really, really good point. As we're really going to see this is not going to be the focus of this class, that this concept that Dr. G just mentioned, and I'm going to follow up on, is not going to be something that we hammer home every single week in this class, but I think it's really important to start off this way. There's oftentimes a disconnect, even among behavior analysts, between applied and research. And a lot of applied behavior analysts do not feel that it is their job to conduct research, right? Or that research is beneficial in their practice, or that they should be working, that they should be conducting it in any way, shape, or form. So what I would say to them is, when you have a question, where should you turn? One option should be the literature. Once you are in the literature, you should be looking for what has been done, what has been effective, what might be effective in the future. Your first line of defense should be to find interventions that have been effective relative to your current participant. You take baseline data, you test, you return to baseline data. Maybe you test again. Guess what? You just conducted some level of replicable research, right? Let's say you do not have an effect at that point. You go back to the research. What have other people suggested might work in the future if this does not work? Now I have a new intervention. I need to make sure it's technically sound. I need to make sure it follows the principles of behavior. I need to make sure that it is applicable to my behaviors of interest. And then what do? I test, I intervene, I test to see if my intervention was effective, and maybe intervene again if needed. Well, what did I just do? I conducted some form of testable research. And maybe it's not of publication quality. Maybe it is, probably more so than people would tend to think. But I followed the research process to inform my practice. Had I skipped any one of those steps, no, I would not have been doing research, but I would have also not been conducting high quality behavior analysis. Data and taking data are not, that's not the thing that separates behavior analysis from other educational and psychological fields, right? Educators take mounds and mounds and mounds of data. Psychologists take mounds and mounds and mounds of data. But we go to the literature to find evidence-based practices. And we have a research methodology that falls directly in line with our practice. Single subject research, right? An N of 1, something that we'll talk about. Psychologists develop their tools through studies that involve 50, 100, 200, 500 participants. How does that apply to their one patient in front of them? Educators are told, go to the literature, go to the literature, go to the literature, but where do they go? And I'm grossly overgeneralizing right here, but they go to Pinterest. They go to Teachers Helping Teachers. They go to non-evidence-based, non-research-based, non-peer-reviewed websites to find things that might have worked by someone else's metric. That's not to say that those sites can't give you good ideas. That's not to say that all teachers eschew evidence-based practices. That's not to say that there aren't good psychologists out there that go to literature and do the same thing. But my point is that our field, our applied field, is based on the exact same principles that our research is based on. And there's not only is there no reason not to use one in the applied research in the applied setting, but I would go so far as to say if you are not using that methodology in the applied setting, you are not practicing behavior analysis. All right.
It's been my experience that every person that's told one of our candidates that they don't see the value in research and experimental research, were not good experimental research themselves. So I'm not sure those are the models that you want to follow, to be quite honest with you. I don't know people that have had really good training and are good experimental researchers have said, you know what, there's really no value in doing all of this. So be very careful about the advice you take, and you have to consider the source. And so please, you know, if all you become is a replication of what the model in front of you was every day at work, then we are really strapping this field with at least one hand tied behind your back. I think part of what we have tried to do and continue to try to do is, you know, this is a CABAS model program, and the first letter of the acronym in CABAS is comprehensive. So we want to teach people skills that are related to the comprehensive application of behavior analysis and draw from all the field of behavior analysis. We believe strongly that is a universal practicing behavior analysis. That is a type of setting, whether it's traditional or non-traditional. And that's the utility of, I think, what drives our program design. And there's no other place in the program where I think you're going to find that so evident than in this particular course. So I think that's an important thing to underscore. Dr. Shanman, where did you want to go next this evening? Did you want to go into more of the innards of Moodle, or do you want to shift to some of the information from that first PowerPoint?
I think I want to go over a couple of Moodle pieces, actually just one. Cat number 2, say everybody, say hello. I want to go over the BDS modules really quickly, and then we can jump into some of the content. All right, this is Harlem. He is very, very nosy, so you'll see him as well. All right, so everyone, I'm going to need your patience, and everyone's going to have to kind of own their own piece here as it comes to BDS. For those of you who are just starting, you're starting from scratch. You'll be able to take kind of whatever I say and run with it. For those of you who have been with us a while, it's going to be a little bit more confusing, unfortunately, than it should otherwise be. Okay, so the module outline has changed a couple times over the last couple of years, and some of you have already done a number of the modules that are now identified for this course. So for those of you who are just getting started, you have a greater number of modules to complete than those who have been in the program for a while. The flip side of that is that you will have fewer modules to do in later courses, which is really, really nice. Because of those of you who took Psych 506 a couple of years ago, and you felt like you had to do 90% of the entire modules. Christine, I see you rubbing your temples because you can relate to that. You have, this is your reward, right? You don't have as many to do right now, but those getting started, you'll have more to do in this class. But it will be more evenly spread out across the different classes. So if you look, let's see, where did I put it? So underneath the schedule, it briefly outlines the 2 tracks. So track 1 will be for those who started the program before last spring. Track 2 will be those who started in spring 2020 or later. Now, if you you will need to look at your set of modules if you fall kind of right in that period, and make sure that you are indeed doing the things that you need to be doing. But we are working on section D. Okay, so keep that in mind. Does everyone have access to the modules? Probably there are a few of you that don't, right? Does anyone not have access to the modules yet? Yeah. Those who are getting started have no idea what on earth I'm talking about. So that's a problem in and of itself. I will need to actually have you email me afterwards, and I will get you set up. There are these sets, a set of like 500 modules that you will be using over the course of the program to guide you, to test you, to teach you, to use in every possible.
That's a shame, and you shouldn't have that many of them.
Yeah,
I only see, let's see, Aaron won't have access, and
Sarah raised her hand, and
Ashley doesn't. Aaron and Ashley for sure. Was there anybody else?
Sarah Gore, you raised your hand, correct?
Yeah, I don't really know how to access them.
I see now.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. So what I'll probably do is hold a little info session for that group, maybe a half an hour before class starts next week, and we can go over that. Okay. All right. So just know that you will be on a bit of a different track than the other crew. Okay. For those who have been around a while, you've done some of section D already. And you can go into your completer report and see what you've done. I can also go in and double check. By the end of the semester, you will need to have everything completed from that section. Okay? So let's just leave it at that. The guidelines are posted on Moodle. I'm not gonna set out confusing everybody right now. Look at when the turn-in dates are. It's weeks 4, 7, 10, and 14. But 2 of those are only for the track 2 people. The track 1 people, the people who have fewer to do, only have a midterm and a final turn-in date. Okay? All right. So that probably muddied the waters even more than they were before. But send me questions. I can look at your individual case. I can verify what it is that you need to do, and we'll get everything settled before next week. And I will hold a little info session on the BDS modules. And Dr. G, for those who are in ethics who are just starting, or are in Dr. Cohen's who are just starting, I'll make sure that everyone gets into that info session. Okay. All right. I think the only other thing out there is there are 5 research summaries, I believe, for this class. So it's not a huge lift in terms of research summaries. The research summary form should be on Moodle. And yeah, we'll be able to go from there. Okay. Cool.
Dr. Shanman, I had a question if you have a second.
Yeah, go ahead, Jennifer.
I just wanted to be super clear. So I pulled up my BDS outline,
Yep.
and the one that I have saved in my computer says that for this class, we have to do section C. That's not required any longer. I don't know if it's an old version or not, but
it probably is.
okay.
Hang on one
So
second.
just section D then.
I'm double checking right now.
Jennifer, do you remember when you got that version?
I want to say that I saved this version last term. But again, I don't know. I mean, there's been so many different versions.
I know
there
have.
The one I saved from last semester has section C on it as well.
Okay. But it also shows that they're completed, so I think that maybe they were
that's the thing. That's the thing. And that's why. Yeah, and if I had read what I had written in its fullest, track 1 you will complete all acquisition modules in section D. Track 2 you will have a heavier workload but a lighter workload later. You will complete acquisition in C and D. Right. So you've already completed. So that is correct. But you have already completed C and like half of D from Seg 506. Yeah. So you just have like half of section D left to do that. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. So did that make sense for everyone? For those who know what the BDS modules are. All right, great. Dr. G, do you want to jump in?
So I think we have 2 different pieces of info that they needed to come in contact with, in this first week, both of which they can read through the PowerPoints on their own. I think that we, need to kind of start them off with what they need to be focusing on. So my question to you is, do you want to start off with the PowerPoint related to the first chapter in the text, or the PowerPoint related to what is evidence? Sorry.
I think we should jump into what is evidence, personally.
Let's do that. Why don't we do this? Why don't we take 5 minutes to do bathroom break, stretching, and stuff like that. Coffee, obtaining, which is my favorite activity to do during these classes. And then let's come back and we could have uploaded that document and everything. So at 6
And I'm going to, for those who wish to challenge themselves a little bit, I'm going to pose the question for you. What do you consider evidence to be? All right. All right.
So at 5:55, let's just return to the scene of the crime here.
Sounds
Go
good.
from there. All right. All right. I am going to, Dr. Cameron, I think I might need to share my screen. Oh, I can.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, you
Thank you
should be
very
good.
much. Okay. Can you guys see a title that says evidence-based practice?
Yep.
Okay, good. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to start off with this one, and there's another one that I want to shift to so I can illustrate to you how I think it's really important to encourage families and stakeholders of ABA services to be able to articulate that to them also. So this is more meant for the graduate student or the professional, but I do want to shift in the second part of this to kind of the same information, but how to deliver that to a family, to an IEP committee, and so on. All right. So this presentation came from Dr. Gina Green several years ago at ABAI. And it holds true today. So there's no lack of message just because it's a few years old. I do want to preface it by saying that she's providing this information against the backdrop of services for autism. Those of you that know me very well know that I hugely advocate for our services to go beyond autism. That is not how I got started in this field. It was only, I guess, in the last maybe 10 or so years that I've been shifting my practice a little bit more to autism, simply because that is what the demand was at the time. But my initial training and my kind of interest in ABA lie well beyond that. And that's not to say that if that's what you're interested in, I'm not trying to downplay that at all. I think it's certainly important, but our field has so much to give and so much to do with the larger population that I don't want us to get lost in the shuffle, so to speak. So just keep in mind that this is the examples that are shown here are related to autism service provision, but that is not its only application. So we need to make sure we got that piece right. All right, so I'm going to just kind of make a few points about some of the information that she has to share here. I really like this quote. I think about it quite often. There's a few quotes that I think about every day. This is certainly one of them. And I think that it's been a driving force behind my career. That you have no compass on your ship if you're not using science to sail it. You know, no telling where you're going to go or where you're going to end up with, but in all likelihood, it probably is not going to be scientifically based. All right, sorry. Okay, just keep in mind that when we hear the term evidence-based practice, it originated in the field of medicine. Now, several disciplines talk about evidence-based practice. However, it means different things in these different fields. And just so you know, our field has always purported that its basis is emanating from evidence-based practice. And one of the ethical guidelines that the BACB has developed is a reminder to all behavior analysts that we must use evidence-based practice and recommend interventions that have the most effective efficacy and the most research to back it up. So there's some caveats here that I think are really important to keep in mind, is that when we're talking about evidence-based practice within the field of behavior analysis, we're talking about well-designed single subject research experiments. Single subject research experiments simply are designed to answer the question of whether the change in the dependent variable, or what we are measuring, is a function of what we did in our independent variable or our treatment at this point in time for these participants. That is all we want to know. We don't necessarily want to know if we take these results and apply it to a larger population, would we get the same results? That's a different type of research. And that does hold some value, and there is some evidence in there, but it's not going to really help us very much. Not on a daily basis, moment to moment basis. All right, so keep that in mind. Group research design tells you a lot about the group, but nothing about any one particular person in that group. And single subject experimental design tells you a lot about each person, but not necessarily about a whole group. So because we are in a situation where behavior analysts are interested in the behavior of the individual, that is why we have to kind of rest our hat on single subject research design, because it informs us moment to moment every day. And that is what it purports to do, to have you answer the question, is what I did with this person changing the outcome for that person? Not about 20 people, not about 200 people, and so on. That's a whole other question that you have to ask, and a whole lot other type of research that you have to apply it to. With that said, I would rather have a replication of 1,000 N of 1 studies than one group study with 1,000 people in it. I want you to think about that as we go on. That's really important concept for you to understand. All right, we kind of talked about some of this, so I'm not going to harp on it, but just remember that evidence comes in many flavors. All right, so when we think about autism, again, I said the examples are from the field of autism. So you could plug that into ADHD, traumatic brain injury, a host of other things. You want to keep in mind that a lot of the interventions out there are seemingly promoted simply because they're popular. And they're promoted based on simply the enthusiasm of the spokesperson. So you should not mistaken evidence for popularity or enthusiasm for popularity. It just doesn't make sense that all interventions are comparably effective. So a lot of people will kind of say, why should it matter? If somebody wants to try something, let them. They're going to learn from it. What if it works for them? What if they get help? Well, first of all, if they do appear to get help, how do we know it's because of what they tried? That just might be a correlation, right? And correlation is not causation, and it's definitely not a function between the two variables. A lot of things happen in our lives correlationally, but it doesn't mean that one caused the other or is responsible for the change. So a lot of times that might happen, and we might end up inadvertently promoting a practice that's not helpful to people. So that can waste people's time and money. There's only so much of those. Those are kind of fixed amounts. We also know that a lot of the people that need our help are vulnerable people. And so by letting things fly because people want to try them, that might be a type of exploitation of those vulnerable people. Everybody seemingly wants to help. And it's not always because there's some type of intentional malice that occurs that we have bad practices. But it means that people who need solutions are vulnerable and it could be exploited. We know that there are some cases where non-evidence-based treatment has resulted in physical and emotional injury. We may lose opportunities to make real advances by using real evidence-based practice. And of course, like I said before, you can perpetuate practices that might impede progress. So what's interesting is that right now, globally, you're hearing things like, oh, these individuals received ABA therapy and they were traumatized. And we have reports from them to actually indicate that. Well, there's a lot we don't know about that. And unfortunately, none of that information was obtained using good scientific procedures. First of all, we don't even know how some of those individuals were diagnosed or if they were even really diagnosed with a disabling condition. Secondly, we don't even know if they got behavior analytic treatment. We don't know if the individuals that may have provided this treatment were even appropriately licensed and certified to actually do so. And there's several other things that have emanated from analyzing. We know that a lot of this information was generated from surveys or those types of self-reports. And we know that that's not always accurate and it's not always all-encompassing either. We also know that there are issues related to helping individuals where sometimes there are some cases where they don't understand or know what's best for themselves. Maybe there are individuals out there who think that they shouldn't put on a seatbelt, and maybe they don't. And maybe they're not comfortable with putting on a seatbelt, but we know that typically they're safer when they wear one. There's probably some individuals out there who can argue that learning how to read is too much trouble. Learning how to do math, that's so stressful. But we know time and time again that there are some things that typically are helpful for people. When we do conditioning protocols and we try to expand someone's community of reinforcers, sometimes that same literature will tell us, no, this person is autistic and they emit stereotypy, and you've got to let them do that because that's who they are. Well, that would not apply to any of us who have stereotypy. And we know that when you have the technology to help someone, maybe have other things in their lives that they could be interested in. At that time, it could be their choice, right? They may pick up a book and look at it, conditioned books, and that might open up some doors to other things. But if you don't try to do the things that we know what we can do, then all they may have left to do is sit in a corner and flap. So you don't want clients to only have decisions because they haven't been taught how to do something. You want to give them more choices and opportunities. And I think these are things that you're reading about right now that's in, I'm not saying some of the vetted literature, but it's definitely on social media. And I think it's important to know how to respond to that because it's the right thing to do. So it all gets feathered into the conversation on evidence. And I think they're good matches for each other. We want to be able to test directly the interventions that we are implementing. We don't want someone's, opinions, great. It's love to get what people think about things. But at the end of the day, you don't want to know what somebody thought about getting treated for cancer. Again, that might be important at some level, But at the end of the day, I want to know, did it help them? Right? Did the heart surgery allow them to survive, even though it wasn't a fun experience? So we have to directly test the interventions and not base the evidence on anecdotal reports, opinions, surveys, and those types of things. And we need a direct measure for what it is that we're trying to change. What we're trying to change might not be always what we agree with. What we're trying to change might be the desire of the family. What we're trying to change might be related to what we know the evidence shows us, that if we can help a person do A, then they might be able to do B, C, D, E, and F. And if they want to expand their horizons with those things, and if they don't, that's fine. But it's not going to be because we didn't use the most efficacious procedures to help the most challenging situations. Most people's lives are better because they have friends, they can communicate, they can hold down a job, they can read. And there's a few other things that we could probably put in that category. What types of friends they have, what they do with those friends, that's different. All right, that's where the individualization comes into play. And some people prefer to have a smaller number of friends that they see intimately. Some people prefer to have large number. The bottom line is that we should be part of that solution. We should enable people to be able to make those determinations on their own. But if we don't teach them social skills, they're not going to be able to do any of those pieces. All right, we want to make sure that the replications of the outcomes are able to be conducted by multiple investigators, not just one person. We want other people to be involved in that because we want to see that there's not something inherent to just a certain group of people doing those types of things. We want to make sure that they've been peer reviewed and that they're published in scientific journals. Nowadays, part of the problem with how information is shared is that there's really no vetting to what occurs on the internet. And by vetting, I'm not talking about restricting free speech or anything like that. I'm talking about making sure that studies go to the channels to determine if they meet certain criteria to whether they were done accurately, effectively, with fidelity. You want to know that. All right, so I'm not going to read through those things. We're actually going to shift from this slide to another presentation altogether. But you can read this. This would be constituting indirect or subjective evaluations. Surveys, questionnaires, personal accounts, those types of things. And you'll see an example of that in the next kind of show. A lot of people think that if it's in a book, it must be the hardest evidence possible. And what you're going to learn in this class is books are not considered primary sources of evidence. A journal article is always, in a peer-reviewed journal, is always considered a primary source of evidence. That's critical. You may have a book that encompasses some of those journal articles. That's a little bit better. But let's face it, guys, anybody can publish a book. You can go right now and by the end of the night have a book published. That is not a substitute for evidence. There are probably some books that utilize more scientific evidence than others, but books are considered secondary resources. All right, we're going to shift 1 second. Just bear with me so I can change this out. And I want to take kind of exactly what I went through with you guys and run it through same information, but something that was designed for lay people. Because I do think you need to start thinking about, how am I going to be scientific with parents? How am I going to be scientific with clients, with other non-behavior analysts, and so on? So that's what we're going to shift to right now. And I'm trying to move as quickly as possible. Of course, there's always something.
Does anyone have any questions so far?
It's a good time.
Lots of information to take in.
I do.
Go ahead.
So I was thinking, so you always read research where it's almost always effective, it seems. Do they not publish research that's not effective, or is it just rare?
That's a really good question, Ashley. And there are actually different camps in various research communities about whether.
You kind of cut out there. Right?
Oh, sorry. Am I still here? There are different camps in various research communities as to whether or not ineffective studies are worthy of publication. I tend to think that the answer should not unequivocally be yes, but that more of it should be published than is published. I think that the defining factor as to or the critical variable as to whether or not it should be published is whether or not the question was developed in a sound manner, and that the research was conducted in a sound manner. And if those two things are done appropriately and it is found to not be effective, I absolutely think that that is a contribution to the community. If there's a conceptual issue with the development of the question, or you have a technical issue with the implementation of the research, then yeah, I don't think most of those studies, whether they're successful or unsuccessful, are kind of caught in peer review and not published anyway. So I at a conference one time, I was presenting on something that had moderately ineffective results, but led to a future study that did have good results. And I said that I wanted to start the journal of shit that didn't work. And I still think that journal is necessary. So if anyone wants to be the editor of that, we're in good shape.
Yeah, the journal of what not to do. That was my title of it. Now, Ashley, I think a couple of things I'm going to piggyback off of. First of all, when you look at different types of evidence, there are certain treatments for different things, I'm talking about globally, that there's just no research on. All right. So that is a no evidence issue, that it's not a validated treatment because there's simply no research on it.
And that's something I've had trouble with understanding.
There's another type of evidence. What's that?
I was going to say that's something I've had trouble figuring out before when looking for research on a particular program, let's say. I'm not sure if I'm just not searching for it correctly or if it's just not effective. So now, that's why there's no research.
And one of the things you're going to learn in this class is how to navigate through all of that. Okay. And a lot of times people struggle with, I want to look up research on token boards. Okay, well, you might have to search positive reinforcement to get token economy research. Okay, but I want to look up the effectiveness of a periodic contingency board, and they're looking at board. board. Okay, you're probably not going to get anywhere with that. All right. So a lot of times people make the mistake of looking up the name of the intervention rather than the tactic. All right. So, but there are some things that there's simply no research on, and people use every day, everywhere in the field of education. That is predominantly what's happening if you walk into your child's classroom, any child, anywhere. Okay. Next, you do have research that might show urging results. Okay, so it hasn't met the standard for evidence base because there's not enough replications, but there's some evidence to show that somebody might be onto something here. There's also another type of outcome that could be considered harmful. So this has been done, and the corpus of research has shown it's harmful. So facilitated communication is an example of that. Certain types of diets, chelation therapy, those types of things have been shown to be harmful. Okay, so it's not recommended because there is no research, because you can't recommend something that has nothing on it. Okay, it's not recommended just yet because it's emerging. It's not recommended because it's harmful. And so there's some degrees of separation with that. I will share with you that we currently submitted an article in which a procedure did not work for any participant. And the editor got back with us and said, we really want to get this published. However, you need to convince us that you did the procedure with fidelity, because maybe it didn't work because you didn't do it correctly. And we're not going to publish findings that we cannot determine if the procedure was done correctly. So if this does not get published, it's going to be because we're not articulate whether we did it with fidelity or not, or we don't have enough measures in place to make that determination.
And with
Okay,
that, there's a big
so
difference.
back to one of the first things that Dr. Shanman said.
Can I go? Sorry, I think we both froze on each other's end for a second. I was, and this might have been what you were going to say, but there's a big difference between if you are replicating someone else's research and show an absence of results versus if you are testing a new procedure and showing an absence of results. If you are replicating someone else's procedure and showing different results than what they showed, that is held to kind of a different standard than if you are doing a novel procedure and do not get results.
Provided you have actually replicated the treatment and done it correctly.
Absolutely.
Which I see, there was recently, or I don't want to call out the author, but she replicated something and she said it didn't work. However, she did not even describe the outcome variable accurately. In the published study, it was published.
And I think we'll get into this more. Yeah. We'll get into this more, but it's a really good question that needs to be looked at.
All right, so I'm gonna take you to the super fast version of what I shared with you from Dr. Green, where this was created for parents. And I want you to see similarities and differences in how things are explained. When most people are seeking a treatment, they want to know where they are and where they need to go. And they want that path to be very clear, right? I have a cavity, go to the dentist, I get it filled, straight shoot. However, when you look at treatments for autism, this is typically the path that you get. So for a family that's trying to find a solution, that is overwhelming. major kinds of things, right? All these different things, and they all have promise or evidence or anecdotal information. What do you do? So when we kind of investigated this, if you would do this Google search, and this was a few years ago, so it may even be exponentially more, you could get 87 million hits on treatment for autism. So think about yourself as a parent of a child who's trying to do the right thing. You Google this, because you know parents are going to do that, and then get 87 million hits. That's not overwhelming at all, right? And within that, not everything has been marketed as a treatment, but there have been over 500 marketed treatments, not evidence-based, but marketed to treat, okay? It's really about making an informed choice. And an informed choice means that you can weigh out the pros and the cons, you're able to weigh out evidence, and then at the end of the day, you make a decision. So you may actually read something that says 150 parents reported improvement in these children when they went on this diet. That might be accurate, but how do you determine or you evaluate the claim and determine if it's safe, effective, and proven? What somebody reports and what may be the outcome are very, very different. Those are two different types of behaviors. So these are the signs you look for when you're looking for that evidence. Evidence-based. This is the information about it. I'm not going to read it to you. Peer-reviewed. Here's how we try to explain to families what's the peer-reviewed process. Scientists study things. They write up their results. They send it to a journal. The editor then sends it out for peer review, meaning experts in the field who do not know who you are because it's blind review will read it and provide their critiques. Typically the outcomes are, and these are not easy critiques, everybody's trying to be skeptical here. That's their job. So either your feedback will be, you can publish this with no revisions. I don't know any human who's ever gotten that. You can publish this with minor revisions, major revisions, additional experimentation, or under no circumstances are you going to publish this piece of trash. That's usually the 5 options that you get. 4 out of those 5 I've gotten in my lifetime. I think you could figure out what the 4 are. Okay. So the peer-reviewed process is a quality mark for science, and it trickles in the bucket. It contributes to the body of evidence for a particular field. So what parent would have time to investigate the entire body of evidence? Well, there are some solutions to that. We have systematic literature reviews that have been curated, and authors have pulled in all of the literature around a certain subject area. Those of you that took class with me last semester, I sent you out Mark Lobanoz's systematic literature review on reducing stereotypy and those types of things. Now, the literature review in and of itself is not necessarily considered a primary source, but when combined with other things, it helps you as a consumer to analyze things, because the literature review, where they're pulling all the experiments on a certain subject, they're not conducting an experiment themselves. They're just reporting other people's experiments. All right, so we go through all of that. And then from there, it relates to what we were sharing with Ashley earlier, emerging, ineffective, why should it matter, cost benefits, you want to weigh that out. You cannot get people's time. I worked with the family outside of this country for years, and they insisted on flying their child to Los Angeles to get some type of magnet put over his head. So they packed up the whole family. They would fly out to Los Angeles, a 12-hour flight, get the treatment in 2 days, come back, and they were doing that. And then at some point in time, they realized that that was not the case, but it was not helping. And change. And I think they were a little bit depressed because they realized they couldn't get that time and money back. There are some warning signs that I want to leave you with, and we'll call it a night since we're about 3 minutes over after this. There are some red flags that when you hear about these things and they use these terms, no go, press the red button. Truncate. Nothing is a cure for very much. We could talk about autism, we don't have to talk about autism. There are no quick fixes. There's miracles, only testimonials, only anecdotals. We'll treat ASD and every other condition. I recently saw the page of a particular type of medical professional. I don't want to call it out. Last semester I shared this. Somebody was talking. And on that webpage, it said that their product cured PTSD, cured ailments, cured gastrointestinal problems, cured autism, cured marital problems. I mean, it was a laundry list. I was like, what is that number? Let me call right now. Half of my problems could be gone with snorting up this stuff in one 5-minute session, okay? But, and people were going to this person in droves. And this person even knocked on the door of my own establishment and purported to be a relative, which forced me to have to call some of my aunts and uncles to make sure this person was not a relative. Anyway, again, I think a well-meaning individual and wanted to but anything that was happening, none of it was based on true scientific evidence. Now, a lot of people will ask, well, wait a minute, isn't behavior analysis something that's supposed to help everything? This is where I think it's important for you to understand behavior analysis is not a treatment. The almost 300 tactics under the umbrella of behavior analysis, those would be the interventions for the problem. So when you have almost 300 tactics or interventions underneath one scientific umbrella, you can't say that ABA is the treatment for any one particular thing. Maybe a combination of some of those tactics might treat certain conditions pretty well. But don't get confused with that. A lot of people, a lot of lay people will talk about, oh, they're getting ABA treatment. Well, that might be very different. Maybe Ashley's clients getting tactic number 1, 7, 12, and 211, and Vincent's clients getting 177, 96, and 42. Their programs might be completely different. And if they would be getting the same treatment, maybe they wouldn't have the same outcomes. So I think there's a lot to consider here. I'm gonna leave you on that note, and hopefully it spurred up enough interest for you to go down the pipeline of reading some more about these things. All right. So Dr. Shaman, I'll turn it over to you if you want to have any closing.
All right. I know I have to get to another class, and a couple of people already had to jet out. So I want to thank you all for showing your bright and wonderful faces. Thank you for your wonderful questions. And I look forward to the rest of the semester with you guys. Again, for those of you who are just starting, I will hold a little informational session next week for the BDS module. So I will get you all the information that you need for that. All right. Have a good one, and we'll see you later. Bye.